Hello, and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and we're here to explore the stories of the people and organizations shaping the future of manufacturing. Before we dive into today's episode, remember to check us out, manufacturingculturepodcast.com, and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for the latest updates and insights. Today, we're continuing our mission-driven organization theme month, where we highlight the people behind the organizations working tirelessly to change the perception of manufacturing. Today's guest is a true advocate for the manufacturing industry, and her passion is truly inspiring. I'm delighted to introduce Regan Brewer Johnson, the president of the Jane Addams Resource Corporation, or JARC for short. Her strategic vision, which extends to JARC Chicago, Baltimore, and Rhode Island, has propelled her to lead a nationally recognized workforce development organization with a combined annual budget of $5.7 million with an M dollars. JARC's work has made it a household name in sector-based training programs, businesses and workforce services, and the Center for Working Family Services. Under Reagan's exceptional leadership, JARC has become a beacon of success in the manufacturing and construction industries. It's synonymous with sector-based job training programs, business and workforce services, and the Center for Working Family Services. Her ability to attract new funding streams, design innovative programs, and establish data-driven solutions has been transformative for JARC and the communities that it serves. But Reagan's journey didn't start here. With a rich background in nonprofit community development, she's worked in a national foreclosure prevention program and a residential treatment center. Holding a master's in nonprofit management from DePaul University and a Six Sigma Green Belt certification, Reagan's expertise and passion are evident in every step she takes. So strap in, folks, as we dive into a conversation with Regan Brewer Johnson, exploring her journey, the impact of JARC, and the exciting future of workforce development in manufacturing. It's an episode you're not going to want to miss. Hello, Regan. Welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I am fantastic. It's a beautiful day. Sky is blue.
Must be nice.
Yeah.
I'm
So
in
I,
sunny Chicago.
I didn't mean to say that as horrible as it sounded, right? But
Dropping that in, aren't you?
yeah, I did. I really did. That was my bad. Sorry about that one.
It's okay.
Regan, I really excited to have you on. I appreciate you being here. Your organization, I was introduced to you actually by a previous guest, Danny, who had nothing but amazing things to say about the organization, but you in general. And so I knew that I needed to like connect with you, and we hit it off. Like we were talking before we started recording, we could probably have a cocktail together. So that's how I'm now going to judge whether people can be on the show or not.
Right.
Can I have a cocktail with this person? So Regan, I'm excited to hear your story, hear about JARC, hear about your vision for the future. Before we get into all that about JARC, I want to hear your story. What's your journey been? How have you gotten to where you are leading this massive organization that's doing such important work?
Great question. Sometimes I'm not sure myself because I took this position in July of 2020, so it was like the best time to take on a new job. But I've been at JARC since 2008,
Oh, wow.
and just kind of like worked my way up. So it was already in the works before COVID hit that I was going to take this role.
Got it.
But that's not really, I mean, I can talk about JARC all day. I think one of the reasons why I do this work is it has a lot to do with my family life and my upbringing. My dad worked in the steel factories on the south side of Chicago when I was a kid. So
Okay.
I remember running around like big coils of steel, and I thought it was so cool because they had a cat in the warehouse, and the cat was there to like kill the mice. But I was obsessed with the cat. So I was like running around as a little kid in this manufacturing environment, which probably I shouldn't have been. But that's a whole nother story. And long story short, the steel industry in Chicago was pretty decimated, and my dad got laid off. It had a really significant impact economically on my family. I'm the youngest of five.
Oh, wow.
My dad left the family, and my mom was a single mother for a while of five kids. And so, you know, thinking about economic security has been sort of a lifelong journey for me, and really thinking about like, what are some of the factors that made an impact on my life to change my trajectory? Because my older siblings did not go to college, and left home at 18 and went into the workforce. And so I got a different set of circumstances because my stepfather came into my life and just basically said, "You're getting an education." And to me, that was really pivotal and sort of the catalyst that changed my longer term career pathway. And I think that's what JARC does for people is, JARC kind of intervenes in someone's life to provide an opportunity that hasn't been offered to them or put in front of them in the past for whatever reason, whether it was an educational failure, a family failure, or whatever. But those systems fail people, and so I think one of the things that we do is we provide opportunity to actually be able to get on a career pathway with a living wage job, benefits, access to a retirement plan, and all of those things that really help boost people out of poverty and into the middle class. So that's kind of in a nutshell, like why I do this work specifically. I didn't realize that for a long time in my adult life until probably a few years ago, sort of like the why am I doing this, and how am I connecting that back to like my whole lifespan and the decisions that I've made and the privilege that I've had over the course of my life,
Yeah.
despite kind of having some trouble as a kid.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And it's, I mean, some people go their whole lives, Reagan, without realizing that connection, right? So for you to be able to do it at such a young age is amazing. And
I have a great therapist. So she's amazing.
I was just talking, and you're younger than me, Reagan. You've got to be a millennial, if not Gen Zer, right? So,
Oh, I'm going to be 45 in a couple of months. So
are you really? You're my
yeah,
age then.
I am technically Gen X,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of on the cusp.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
born
79.
in 79. So
All right, me too. All right,
that's
fantastic. We're on the yeah. You look. It's the gray in my beard that makes me look so much older than you, I think. And you
yeah,
just
I pull them, so you can't see they've been plucked.
all right. But I was just talking yesterday about how therapy. It took me a long time to really gravitate to therapy, and how important therapy has been in my journey, and learning empathy, and learning how. I wasn't able to be an empathetic person until I went and tackled my own demons from growing up and my childhood, right? And how therapy has helped me in this journey to get to this point. And highly recommending to this group of manufacturers yesterday that you should all go see therapists if you're not already. So I love that you've got a great person for you to go talk to. That's great.
Well, I mean, part of it, and sorry to interject, but part
No.
of it, we have, we work at JARC, we work with a population that has a lot of trauma, and there's also a lot of stigma around mental health. And so I feel like if I can say it, if I can talk about, going to therapy and the benefits of it, or being medicated or whatever, hopefully that can break down some reluctance or resistance that people have to seeking out mental health support, because I just feel like there's too much stigma around it. So I'm
Yeah.
very open and kind of like an open book about it. So
Yeah. And I feel the same way, and that's why I brought it up to this group yesterday. Men are very reluctant to go see therapists. Older generation very reluctant to go see therapists. Different racial groups are very reluctant to go see therapists, right? So yeah, the more that people who have been can normalize that experience and just say, hey, you go see a doctor, a general practitioner.
Right.
This is the same kind of checkup, just for a different part of your anatomy, right? I think that's important. Um, so JARC is an amazing organization. I've learned a little bit about it. But tell us more about JARC's core mission, what you all do there. But I'm really interested, because we talk a lot about values on here, and you talk about, your why. How does JARC's mission align with the personal values that you have?
Yeah, so JARC has been around since 1985 in Chicago, since about 2015 in Baltimore, and we recently opened up last year in Rhode Island. And we're looking at, you may find us in a city near you sometime soon. We'll see. Um, our main goal is that people that work should not live in poverty, and we use advanced manufacturing as a mechanism to do that. And so we started in one of the industrial corridors here in the city of Chicago in 1985, because that corridor had lost about 7,000 manufacturing jobs from the late 70s to the early 80s.
Wow.
So we began more as an industrial retention initiative, but as we started working with companies, we realized workforce was the big issue that they were wrestling with. So we began working with the companies that were initially in that small geographic area, but most of them were metalworking companies. So we developed our core competencies around metalworking. So we do machining, welding, metal forming. We do some assembly work. We also do a lot of safety and forklift. And we target existing workers at companies. So companies will hire us to come in and upskill their existing workers. And then we also target unemployed and underemployed individuals. So we operate 4 or 5 different training centers where unemployed and underemployed people can come in and train on our machines. We do that with a variety of different sort of like best practices that we feel are critical. So the Financial Opportunity Center, or Center for Working Families model, is a package of services. So if you're coming in for, let's say, a welding training, you're also going to get career coaching, financial coaching, access to emergency supports, public benefits screening, a variety of things. So we want to make sure that people can be stable while they're in the training program, and then put them on a pathway to long-term success in their career, but also life. So, being able to access mainstream financial institutions is really important, opening
Yeah.
a bank account, and understanding what the 401k is going to do for you in the long term. So those are some of the things that some of the additional supports that people are getting while they're in our programs. So I mentioned, like, we believe that advanced manufacturing is a mechanism to get people into good jobs, good careers.
Yeah.
So we believe in supporting the sector, so we equally value the manufacturing companies that we work with, as well as the workers or the job seekers. So we also provide, our training programs operate on an open entry, open exit. So if an unemployed or underemployed individual applies to the program and we think they're a good fit, we'll be like, hey, can you start on Monday?
Wow.
And that way we also have a pipeline for our employers. So we always have people that are ready to go. If an employer calls us and says, hey, I need someone because I got to ramp up on second shift next week or whatever, we'll say, okay, well, we'll send you a few resumes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a way to meet the job seekers' needs in real time, but also the employer's needs in real time.
Yeah.
And the way that we do that is through a workplace simulation. So we're simulating the work environment. Trainees, when they come in, they clock in, they get assigned to a team, they get assigned projects. They have to, for CNC, for example, they've got to write the program, set up the machine the part, do the quality inspection on it. It's pass fail. You don't get like a C plus on a part because some of it's within tolerance and other parts are not within tolerance. So like if one, hole on a block or whatever it is that they're machining is out of tolerance, then they scrap it and they have to do the whole thing over again.
Okay.
So it's very much like it would be on a job, as much as we can simulate.
Sure.
So yeah. So that's kind of how the programs work. I would say in terms of like your question about values, we value people's interest in pursuing career pathways. We want to support them in that. We value the manufacturing sector because we know that it's a good source of family sustaining wages and careers. We value equity and inclusion. And so we're always trying to make sure that our programs have a DEI or REI, lens applied to them. And I think all of those things, kind of connect back to my personal story.
Yeah.
Around like being economically secure was a thing in my childhood that I didn't feel all the time. And so like I understand as how that translates into the families that we serve. And one of the things that I quote this, and I don't know if this is actually accurate, but it's something like 70. I'm just gonna claim it from now on. I'm the data expert.
Yeah.
So something like 70% of kids that are in poverty as children remain in poverty as adults.
Oh my
And
God.
so, yeah. And so I think about that because I'm like, wow, I was part of like the 30%
Wow.
that didn't grow up and continue that cycle of poverty. And so like, I think about like, what does it do for an individual that comes through our program to go from a low socioeconomic status to getting into a good job in manufacturing? And then what does that do for their whole family? What's the ripple effect on the community? So those are some of the things that I spend probably too much time thinking about.
No, I don't think it's too much time at all. I mean, I live in Arizona and we have a couple of large populations that have experienced generational poverty, right? We've got an indigenous population that lives on reservations and people think, oh, they're in the middle of nowhere. No, literally on the other side of Scottsdale for me is a reservation of indigenous humans that are living that generational curse, right? You've got people coming up from Mexico and South America and Central America, and there are large populations here that are living in generational poverty. You've got Black and brown populations that have moved here from Los Angeles or the middle of the country to escape cold weather. Sorry, Reagan. But they are still living those generational curses, right? So I don't think you're thinking about it too much. That exists, I think, in a lot of areas, right? But when I talk to schools and talk to students, that's one thing that I talk to them about is uh, there are pathways and manufacturing, similar to you. To me, manufacturing is that way to help create that sustainable pathway that does break those generational curses of poverty. Um, it's not going to be easy. Nobody's going to like hand you that job.
Right.
But if you put in the work, it then becomes a lot easier for you to sustain your life, your family's life, your grandma's life, etc. Right? So I love that mission that you're on.
And
Um,
I think one of the things that people don't understand about manufacturing too is like manufacturing can be fun. Like it's not for everyone, right? But like I once was doing a tour with some people around our training center, and we've got a pretty big welding department. And I just randomly grabbed a trainee and I'm like, hey, what do you think about, welding, and why do you like it? Why were you interested? And he's like, because I get to melt hot metal. And I was like, whoa, okay, this guy is going to be a great welder. I'm like, he's just like so excited about like, I get to manipulate hot metal. And I was just
that's
like,
awesome.
okay, this guy's having a fun old time in this welding booth.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, the correlation, Reagan, and kind of going back to this, your last point, the correlation and your origin story, your history, the correlation between the contraction of the middle class and jobs being offshored and manufacturing not being a focus in high schools and middle schools is 100% evident. I talk a lot about how post World War II, this country was built on the back of the middle class, and the middle class was built on the back of skilled trades, specifically manufacturing. And it sounds like JARC is on that mission and that path to fix that.
Yeah, and I think that it's tough too because, we work in manufacturing in Baltimore, for example, and at the height of the steel industry, Baltimore had Bethlehem Steel, and they
Right.
had like 20,000 workers or something. So there's a whole economy built off this. Generations of families like built their, wealth off of this steel industry. And a similar thing happened in Chicago where it just kind of went away.
Yeah.
And people have this like visceral response to it where it's just like they were burned so bad by it
Yeah.
that when they think of manufacturing, it conjures up like that sort of like painful memories for them. And so we're trying to like change that image and change that like the rhetoric around dark and dingy, and also like just this visceral response that people had when like Bethlehem Steel went away in Baltimore, the steel industry died out in Chicago.
Yeah.
But it changed, it's different. Like we're not talking to companies that I was running around in as a little kid where there's just giant rolls of steel everywhere. We're talking to companies in these like high tech machining jobs and automation and robotics and like cool different welding techniques, and so it's just very different, and it's hard to like shift that mindset when you've had like generations of people that have been like so jaded by some of that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And we talk a lot about how the perception that we have to change is dark, dirty, dangerous. But you touched on something that I don't know if a lot of people realize, right? It's not that people are remembering, maybe some are, but it may not be everybody's remembering grandma or grandpa coming home dirty and missing fingers. They're remembering the fact that grandma or grandpa came home and no longer had a job
right.
because that industry abandoned, or that company abandoned their city, their town, their community. So that I think that's an important distinction, right? And it's not just a dark, dirty, dangerous perception that we're trying to combat. It's that trust and building trust back up within the industry of manufacturing, that these companies are here, that we're not going to leave next time it becomes cheaper to go overseas somewhere. We're here to stay, and I think that's where those technology manufacturing companies are providing a little bit different view than the steel coil companies of your childhood.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously other things that factor into this. We work in a lot of communities of color, and they may have manufacturing companies in their community, but they don't see those as jobs for them. So that factors, that plays a role. I think the
Yeah.
other thing is we've had decades of telling high schoolers you need to go to a 4-year institution. And so now we're trying to unwind that, but it's like, how do you unwind decades of messaging? You're going to
Yeah.
have another couple of decades to change that and shift that mindset, especially with parents. So
Yeah.
that's also factoring into, some of the strain that manufacturers are having on trying to fill positions that people are either, retiring out of, or they need to upgrade their skills or advance their skills in order to keep those positions. So there's a lot of factors that go into it.
So how is JARC working to change those perceptions? I mean, because you're not just working with the individuals, you're working with the companies themselves, right? How are you working to change that perception to get people interested and on one side, fill those pipelines for organizations, but also how are you changing the perceptions that some of these companies have, right? I mean, a lot of these companies look at DEI as just a buzzword. They look at soft skills as something that people don't necessarily need in this world. So how does JARC work to change those perceptions?
It's not like one magic bullet or strategy. It's a lot of them. So, I think, we do everything that we can to expose people, to expose communities. So for example, this is next Saturday, we have something like 250 people signed up, which is like way more than we should have, to a welding exposure day. This is just community residents that want to come in and like learn a little bit more about welding. So this is in Baltimore. So if you're
Wow.
listening, please don't show up at our location next. We'll have another one. You get to register at another time, but but we're just kind of doing like a fun. Here's what welding. Here's what CNC looks like. Come on in. It's kind of an open house type of situation. We do lots of like field trips with high schoolers. I mean, all kinds of just exposure things. I think when you come into our shop, it very much looks like a manufacturing facility. And so you're going to see equipment that you may have not have ever known that even existed. Like a lot of people don't know what CNC is.
Absolutely.
But once you explain it, people can get the feel for it and get the vibe. And, you start to talk about like, hey, remember when you did high school math, you thought that was not relevant to anything in your life? This is where it gets relevant. Like, this is why you did those Cartesian coordinates and, for all
Yeah.
of junior year that you hated. Like, this is where
Mhm.
it actually gets applied. And so, for people that are interested in, you making things and using your hands and all that fun stuff, like, this is a way for people to get excited and interested and motivated to get a career in manufacturing. Because, like I said, manufacturing can be really fun. I was TIG welding the other day, and I was just like, "Damn, this is hard." like, but it was fun. Like this is like Jesus. I have a so much more of an appreciation for TIG welding than I ever did before, just because, damn, it's hard.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not an easy task at all.
No, I'm like, that's why you get paid more,
Yeah.
than MIG. I get it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, not that I'm a great MIG welder either, so I'm not making that claim. I'm just saying, like, TIG welding is hard.
It is.
So,
Absolutely. So how quickly, you have this pipeline, apply to pipeline type model. How quickly are people production ready? I guess is the easiest way for me to put it. You may have a different term, but how quickly
sure.
from the time they apply are they ready to be placed with one of your corporate partners?
Yeah, it depends on the track that they go through. It could be anywhere between 8 to 10 weeks up to 20 weeks.
Okay.
It really, so because the programs are open entry, open exit, people work through them at their own pace. It's also everything is hands on. So you don't see people sitting in a classroom. They're either in a welding booth or they're at a machine. And so, they're given a project to work on, and then they have to basically, make a part.
Yeah.
So, it might take some people longer to catch on to certain concepts or topics. It might
Sure.
take some people longer to lay down a good bead for welding, I mean, but some people go through really quickly. And so the programs all culminate in at least one or two industry certifications. So we use American Welding Society, we use National Institute for Metalworking Skills, we use SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, depending on the track.
Yeah.
So once they get their industry certification, they're usually ready to go. In terms of technical skills, there's also a whole lot of other things that we assess before they enter the workplace. So all those soft skills related things, like how has their attendance been? How's
Yeah.
their attitude been? Do they have a resume? Have they done some mock interviews? Do we think they're going to do well in an interview? Because obviously we can't get the job for them, but we
Right.
can send their resume out and make a recommendation to an employer. So,
Yeah.
people can work through at their own pace, which is nice. But, some people are more motivated and just like they show up at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're like, why are you here this early? Oh my God. And they stay late, which is great because they're like working on whatever projects they're working on.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on the individual, and it also depends on which track they end up going to, whether they go to, CNC tends to take a little longer,
Sure.
versus like an assembly program, which is shorter. So it
Yeah.
just varies.
And where do you find the applicants, right? Are these people that are, working fast food jobs, retail jobs, unemployed completely? Are they coming out of the prison system? Where are you finding the applicants, and how does somebody go about applying to your programs?
Good question. So the answer is all of the above. We
Okay.
work with a lot of other community-based organizations, the American Job Centers, just a variety of ways that we kind of get the word out about our programs, social media. We work with, people that have been incarcerated. We work with people that are experiencing homelessness. We work with people that are in retail or fast food types of jobs. Typically, the people ask like, who's the average person in your program? I'm like, well, it's hard to say, but I will say
Right.
it's typically someone that is like late 20s, early 30s that has probably made some mistakes in their life, but maybe now have trying to get it together to where like they have a family or a partner or kids or something, and they know that they can't cut it in a fast food type of job. They need
Yeah.
something more. They need benefits. They need full time. They need stability, and so that's why they're seeking out manufacturing because they've gotten the word that that's an area where you can make a living wage and get benefits and have like a stable career.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, I had another question follow up to that, but I lost it.
It's
Your superpower, if I were to say that you have a superpower, one of them at least, is raising money. Um,
oh,
I mean,
sure.
for you to have that kind of a budget across those multiple facilities, right, and have that kind of financial resource, as somebody who we have a small apprenticeship program here in Arizona, right, and we're nowhere near that. Um, what are some tips and tricks for people out there, and without giving away your superpower and your secret sauce, what are some things that people can do to raise money for organizations like JARC, like Skill Up Arizona, like other programs that are designed to help fill the workforce?
That's an interesting question. I think the thing that we usually lead with is, our data. Like we have really strong data on outcomes. So we know we've got really high
Okay.
completion rates, placement rates, retention rates, wages. And, one of the programs that we use, for example, is SNAP employment and training. And so the whole notion is to get people off SNAP benefits, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, they may be on SNAP benefits while they're in our program, but we know that they're not going to need SNAP benefits in the long term. So, you can kind of play both sides of the political
Yeah.
equation. But we usually lead with our outcomes, and that with manufacturing you're going to have good wages.
Yep.
That you're going to have a decent ability to place people because manufacturers, as long as you're giving people the right skills that they need,
Yeah.
so they have the good, solid technical skills, and we know they've been reliable and had a good attitude and things like that. You're not going to really have a problem finding a job right now in
Sure.
manufacturing. So you're going to have good outcomes, and as long as you're tracking those outcomes and you can demonstrate to potential funders, like this is what our program does. Like we literally move people out of lower socioeconomic status and into the middle class, and we can demonstrate that with our data. And so I think that's kind of a powerful tool that like anyone can kind of get behind,
Yeah.
regardless of your political affiliations or beliefs around, public benefits and things like that. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't really argue with that because who's not going to get on board with it, you
Right.
know?
Oh, absolutely.
So,
And so it sounds like you use that data. I mean, you're a big data person, queen of data. I think you dubbed yourself earlier in the episode. Um, and so that's the best way for you guys to measure your success, right? Is through that data. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean that's I hate the term like data driven, but we do have like a because I don't want to be driven by data. I want to be driven by like human beings, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but we do have a good culture of data, so we collect a lot. We can demonstrate not only just on the placements, retention, wages piece, but we collect a lot of data on financial stability and financial well-being. So we can show that individuals, like after they get placed into a company, are they also working on long-term financial health indicators? So
Wow.
are their credit scores increasing? Is their net worth increasing? Is their net income and that kind of thing increasing? Are they opening bank accounts? Are they opening lines of credit to buy things? Hopefully not just credit cards, but like to buy a car. um, so we're looking at all those other indicators that basically tell us if someone is on a path to more long-term sustainability, because just getting a decent job isn't going to like suddenly lift you and your family out of poverty. You really,
Sure.
a lot of times once you get that job, you're paying like, I got this bill, this light bill that I haven't paid in 3 months. So now I got to catch up on that. So like you're not instantaneously like somehow I'm now middle class, but you can look at some indicators over time of, are people, accessing mainstream financial institutions and services,
Sure.
and is their, income and debt moving in the right direction and things like that. So those are some of the other factors that we look at on a regular basis and just like over time to,
And so you guys coach them through all of those steps, though, right? I mean, those are programs that you have. I believe Danny said something about mortgage programs and other programs like that, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
So typically, when the way that our programs are designed in every location, they're 5 days a week. 4 of those days are going to be welding or machining, and then one day is going to be a financial education workshop or a work readiness workshop or computer classes, digital literacy training. So in addition to those classroom based services, then throughout the week, they're meeting one on one with their coaches. So
Wow.
they might meet with an employment coach to do a resume. They might meet with their financial coach to look at their credit or their household budget. And then after placement, we have people that will follow up long term. So we'll do checks in, after a month that they're working, after 90 days, 6 months, to check in and see how things are going. And then just to kind of remind people like, hey, when you are ready to buy a house, come talk to us. When you're ready to buy a car, come talk to us. Like we can help get you to that point, to where you need to be, or we can just do some goal setting and some, put a plan in place now, because buying a home or a car is not exactly like something you just wake up one day and you're like, I'm just gonna do this. So like you got to think through some things before you get to that point. And so like
Right.
that's what we can help with. We can help sit down with someone over the course of time so that they can make some whatever changes they need to make, to get to that point. So
That's
that's a
awesome.
big piece of what we do.
How does JARC do you vet the organizations that you then place the employees into, right? And talk to us about that process of vetting those organizations.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that we have necessarily a formal process in any kind of way. I will say that we work with a lot of the same companies, and a lot of new companies. So we have a lot of companies that have hired from us before. We have people working in those facilities, and they certainly come back to us and tell us what it's like, what the work environment is like.
Yeah.
The other thing is we do a lot of worker training. So our instructors spend a lot of time in companies and getting to understand the company cultures. So we can kind of like vet it through some of that work that we do. There are employers that we just won't work with anymore. And,
Okay.
there's companies that, we either done business with or we've placed people at that they're kind of off the table. They're kind of on a short list, and we won't send people there. So, you know, it's not necessarily a formal vetting process, but we do, I think, a good job of getting to know employers, going over and walking the shop floor with them, understanding like what are their processes, what's the work like, because not every company is the right fit for every trainee that we have.
Absolutely.
And so, we certainly will, we have meetings, every other week or something. The team will sit down and look at the candidates that we have and look at the jobs and kind of match up who we think is going to be the right fit.
Yeah.
And we might even say to an employer, hey, we'll send you 5 resumes, but look at the top 3, so we're making some recommendations, and
Yeah.
we won't send a resume out for anybody that we don't think is placeable. That
Okay.
person would be dismissed in the program. So we do a lot of screening on the upfront for our trainees. So not everybody gets into the program. It is competitive. And basically the only thing, the things that we're looking for are reliability and good attitude. We can teach
Yeah.
you all the technical stuff.
Right.
But I can't like teach you to show up every day on time. You kind of have to do that. So, and then if someone can't get through, they can't show up on every day on time, if they don't have a great attitude, those people will be dismissed in our program and we won't send them out because it doesn't do anybody, we're not doing anybody a favor by training them if we can't place them into a job, and we're not helping the company. We're going to burn a bridge with the company. So we don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
Yeah.
So, we're looking for employers that are going to do right by our people. Not every employer is going to get it right 100% of the time. We get that. So what we're looking for is being able to have an open dialogue with our company partners when something doesn't go right.
Right.
And we will, take feedback. We will try to use that feedback to make our programs better. And, so yeah, so that's kind of how we work with our employer partners.
I love it. I love it. Reagan, what do you see as the future of JARC in the evolving manufacturing landscape? I mean, we're getting to a point now where we've got AI, we've got automation. It's changing the skill sets that people are needing in their facilities, from manual machinists to CNC operators. Now it's, can you program a robot? Can you can you program this automation cell? Those kinds of
Right.
things. How is JARC evolving with the industry's needs?
Yeah, so we have in every location that we're in, we have an industry advisory council. So we have a lot of manufacturing companies on our board, but in addition to that, we have an industry advisory council that helps us with thinking through some of those things. So what are the advances in technology and how are they impacting the workplace, and how can we best prepare our trainees for that? So they vet curriculum, they help us identify equipment, and acquire different pieces of equipment. They help us with like making, modifications to programming. They might say, you need this type of automation versus this other. And they help us kind of stay apprised of what the industry trends are.
Mm-hmm.
And when we need, like let's say we're investing 100K into some kind of like robotic arm, we'll go back to them and say, is this the right one to buy? Like,
Yeah.
so we can get their sort of sense of it. So, we convened a group. When was that? In mid-March, I think it was, just to talk about automation.
Okay.
And so, we're using our industry advisory council and our network of folks to kind of help with that. There's also like the MEP system is great. So the manufacturing extension partnership, we work really closely with,
Yeah.
IMEC and Polaris MEP in Rhode Island. So like there's a lot of resources there. And it's mind boggling sometimes when I'm talking to companies and they don't know. I was talking to a very large manufacturing or car manufacturer. I'm like, do you not talk to the MEP? They're like, what's an MEP? I'm like, okay, I'm making an introduction for you.
That's wild.
And here we go. I'm on
Yeah.
email. So like there's lots of resources, I think, for organizations like mine and for companies out there to try to stay apprised of what's happening in the industry.
Yeah. That's awesome. Uh, what's on the future plans for JARC? You kind of teased earlier, you may be showing up in a city near you.
You never
So
know.
you never know what's the future look like for JARC. And it, part two of that question: if somebody were interested in getting a JARC-esque type facility in their city, how would one go about doing that? Because I would love it, and so I'm going to take some notes. But I'm sure there are other people listening right now. How can we make this happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was telling somebody yesterday, I was like, do you like this space? Because you're gonna see it a lot. Because I'm coming to your city. So I think mainly what we've done is partnerships. So like we don't want to come into a city and claim to know everything either about the industry or about the people in that city. So we are very good. Like if you want a welding training, I am your girl. Like call me up, I can do that. But we also need to understand like what are the nuances in the sector, in the manufacturing industry that because Chicago is not the same as Detroit, is not the same as Rhode Island, is not the
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So like, what are some of those nuances and what are employers really looking for? Understanding the demographics. So the demographics in Chicago are very different than the demographics in Baltimore. So for example, Chicago, we're doing a lot more with Spanish language. Baltimore, we serve just a very challenging population of folks that have been affected by the opioid crisis. So
Right.
there's some differences, there's some nuances. So we want to get to understand that. But we also want to know like who are the partners on the ground. So that's why I mentioned the MEP system,
Yeah.
some of the other community-based organizations, like who is serving the populations that we want to serve. Getting to understand the American Job Center, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, how those dollars flow into the local workforce investment area. Who's on the workforce investment board? Who oversees that, and how does it work? Are there state level resources that you can be tapping into? State of Illinois is broke, but that's not the same for Maryland and Rhode Island, for example. So
Right.
like, um so thinking about all of those things, and then it's a lot of pieces to put together, and it's also very capital intensive because we're working with machines which are not cheap,
Right.
and facilities related, infrastructure. Again, you can't just set up shop anywhere. You can't set up a machine shop anywhere.
Right.
So we need to think about like, how do you get a flatbed truck up to a loading dock in this, facility? And like, do we have a big roll down door? Do we have 3-phase electricity? Like all of those things we have to think about when we're setting up a program. So, um, you know, is it accessible by public transportation? Like those are some of the considerations that we would want to think
Yeah.
through. I think the key thing for me is like, I don't want people to see us coming in and be like, oh, she's from Chicago, she doesn't know anything about our local market.
Right.
And that's probably true. I probably don't know anything. But I want to learn and understand so that we can, adapt and provide, rich programming that supports both the manufacturing local economy as well as, the population that are, being served. So
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And if you ever do come to Phoenix, please let me know. I would love, or if you ever put a pin on a map and say future Phoenix,
okay.
I want to be involved in this
Give
process
you a
somehow.
call.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Um, so I've got two questions left for you, Reagan. First
Sure.
one, um, what advice do you have for people who are looking to help make a difference, help close that workforce skills gap? Because we hear a lot of people talk about it, but fewer people take action. So for those people who talk about the skills gap, how can they make steps to make meaningful impact in our industry?
That's an interesting question. I would say so let's see, how do I unpack decades of
You're
anyways,
welcome.
no, I won't. So like there's between 40 and 50%, I would say, of the individuals that apply to our programs test below a ninth grade level in either math or reading.
Okay.
So, a lot of the work that we do is more refreshers on math and upgrading reading skills and things like that. It's more on the math side than I would say on the reading side. But if those are skill sets that you have, like get involved and volunteer somewhere, because the chances are there's a lot of people that are in this world that you see every day that are struggling with literacy or numeracy. And they're not going to like hold up a flag and be like, I don't read very well, or I can't do math at the grocery store or whatever. But
Right.
they're out there and they're in our communities, and there's organizations that are serving those populations, and they are vastly underfunded.
Okay.
So that is an area, like if you look up adult education or literacy or whatever, you can easily get involved in, because organizations like that typically rely heavily, heavily, heavily on volunteers because they are so underfunded.
Got it.
And it's also an area that I think philanthropy and a lot of other funding streams are moving away from, and they're moving more towards like the hard technical skills.
Yeah.
But you can't get a machining job unless you know how to do math. Like,
Yeah.
so it's great that like, there's more investment happening in the technical skills piece of it, but we're leaving a whole lot of adults behind if we're not bringing them up to where they need to be to get into a decent program.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my like plug to people if they're really interested in closing the skills gap, is like, well, you got to start with real basic skills, because our public school system is not necessarily holding up their end of the bargain. I need to
Yeah.
like be careful what I say around that. So like if you're from CPS, Chicago Public Schools, just like close your ears for a minute, but hope you didn't hear that, anybody out there. But yeah, so that's my
No, I
story.
get it.
I'll shut up now.
No, this is great. This is perfect. And if you want me to edit that out, just let me know. Send me an
No, it's
email down the road.
okay.
All right. So Reagan, last question I ask all of my guests. What haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience, the listeners, the viewers?
Um, That's a good question. I would say go to our website, which is jane-addams.org. So Jane-Addams, ADDAMS. It's Jane Addams. She's the mother of social work. She's very well known in Chicago. If you're not from Chicago, you might not know who Jane Addams is, and you're like, wait. I've actually been called Jane before. Like people will call up and be like, "Hey Jane." I'm like, "I am not Jane Addams. She died a very long time ago." Anyways, sorry. I digress.
Oh, I might start calling you Jane just
Yeah,
for.
you're like, why? I don't get it. So go to our website if you want to learn more about our services. I think the one thing that I want to mention is, you had Danny Hill on. Danny's a great ambassador for JARC and for the manufacturing sector. We have a lot of Danny Hills out there. A lot of people that have been wildly successful, incredibly talented, really inspiring stories. Some of them are on our website. But I just want to say, like, our graduates, our trainees are like what keep me going every day, and they
Yeah.
are incredible human beings. And so if you want to learn more, like follow us on social media. We do post a lot of success stories. We have lots of highlights. Look at our website, and hopefully some of that content will inspire you to give back or learn more or get involved in an organization that's local to you. So
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And folks listening, watching, however you're consuming this, if you're still with us, I will link JARC's website in the show notes, as well as link a link to Reagan's LinkedIn account. So you can contact her through there. Reagan, if you have other people that you think should be a guest on the show, I'd love to have them. Shoot me names. I'm always looking for stories like Danny, right? Because those are the people in this industry that are truly making a difference as far as doing the work to change their lives, and they have the stories about how sustainable this career can be. So I'm always looking for those kinds of stories. Send them over to me. I'd love to do that. I want to thank you very much for being on today. This was a great conversation.
No
It's nice
problem.
to have a cup of tea or coffee with you.
Yes.
Yeah, next time when I come to Chicago for Automate, maybe it'll be an old fashioned.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's in May, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Second
like
week of May. Yeah, yeah. Well,
only
I don't know if
5 weeks away.
I don't know if you drink beer, but we have a lot of really good breweries, so I can take you to a brewery. It's a great,
Done,
good
done,
beer scene here.
done and done. Yeah. So yeah, look forward to meeting you in person, hanging out with you, having a cocktail. Thanks again for being on. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up another just awesome episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. This mission themed or mission driven organizations theme month is opening my eyes a lot, and I hope you all are enjoyed hearing the stories of these organizations that are really changing lives for the better. Again, a massive thank you to Reagan for sharing her journey and the impactful work that JARC does. Leaders like Reagan are changing the game in the manufacturing industry through those mission-driven initiatives. If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to learn more about our guests like Reagan, and the topics that we cover, head over to the manufacturingculturepodcast.com website. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to stay updated with all the latest episodes and insights from the show. If this episode inspired you or made you think at all about getting involved, we'd love for you to share it with your friends, your colleagues, your network, your grandma, family members, whatever. Your support helps us reach more listeners and continue to bring these valuable conversations to your ears. Last, if you have a moment, please rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening to this episode on today, or on YouTube if you're watching it. Your feedback is absolutely crucial in helping me improve, grow, do better. I had somebody talk about different inclusive language that I could use in a previous episode, and it's changing the way that I'm speaking to people, right? So I really appreciate all the feedback, all the reviews. Keep it coming. And it also helps us reach more people because it rockets us up the charts every time you rate and review the show. So thank you very much for tuning in to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. We'll be back next week with more stories from the front lines of manufacturing. Until then, keep innovating, keep inspiring, keep making an impact. Have a great day and keep making things.